Many ancient structures around the world don't just tell us about the past, they whisper secrets we still can't fully understand. Massive stones moved without modern machines, underground cities carved in darkness, patterns only visible from the sky. These aren't just ruins, they are puzzles, physical questions left behind by civilizations long gone. In this series, we'll explore how these places were built, why they mattered, and what they reveal about the people who made them. And most importantly, we'll dive into the mysteries they still hold, the unanswered questions that challenge what we think we know about history. Let's step back in time and uncover the stories etched in stone, buried in sand, and hidden beneath the earth. This is the mystery of ancient structures. In 1850, a powerful storm swept across the Orkney Islands, hitting the coast with such force that part of a grassy mound was torn away. When the storm passed, local people saw something remarkable beneath the sand and turf. Hidden for centuries were stone walls, hearths, and passageways. What they had found was a Neolithic village, later named Skara Brae. The storm had acted like a giant shovel, stripping away layers of sand to reveal homes that had been sealed off and preserved for thousands of years. These structures were so intact that it seemed as if the villagers had just stepped out for a moment, leaving their tools, furniture, and even small objects behind. As archaeologists began to excavate the site, they found a complete settlement frozen in time. The houses were built of stone and connected by covered passageways that sheltered people from the harsh coastal winds. Inside each home were clear signs of domestic life. Hearths sat in the center of the rooms, used for cooking and warmth. Beds were built from stone slabs and arranged neatly around the walls. Stone boxes, likely used to store food, were set into the ground to keep supplies cool. This was a community that understood how to live comfortably in a challenging environment. Their design choices showed planning and skill. The stone furniture and tight passageways gave a sense of order and shared purpose. The suddenness of the village's abandonment remains one of its biggest mysteries. Everything was left behind, as if the people had departed quickly. No evidence suggests a violent invasion or widespread destruction. Theories focus on environmental factors. Rising seas and powerful storms could have flooded the area, making it unlivable. The Orkney Islands sit close to the ocean, and erosion has always been a threat. Some researchers believe that the land near the village was swallowed by the sea, forcing the inhabitants to flee inland. Others think a shift in climate reduced food supplies, putting strain on the community. When crops failed or fishing became less reliable, families may have had no choice but to leave in search of better resources. Social tensions could have also played a role. If resources were scarce, disputes may have fractured the group, leading to its collapse. What makes Skara Brae stand out is not only its sudden disappearance, but also its level of sophistication. These homes were well designed and carefully built, yet there are no signs of large temples, palaces, or structures that suggest a ruling elite. In other ancient societies, like those in Mesopotamia or Egypt, complex architecture usually points to leaders or a class system. At Skara Brae, everyone seems to have lived in similar houses with similar layouts. This raises questions about how the society was organized. Did they live in a cooperative system without a central authority? Or was power displayed in ways that did not involve monumental buildings? The uniformity of the village hints at equality, but without written records, this remains speculation. The discovery of certain materials at the site hints at connections beyond the islands. Archaeologists found objects such as beads and tools made from materials not found locally. These items likely came through trade with mainland Britain or even continental Europe. This suggests that the Skara Brae community was not isolated. They were part of a network of exchange that spread ideas, goods, and perhaps even cultural practices. However, the scale of this network is unclear. Did traders visit regularly, or were these objects rare items passed along through many hands? The lack of definitive evidence leaves room for interpretation. Imagine a small stone village perched near the edge of the sea. Families gather around central hearths, while winter winds howl outside. Fish and grain are stored in stone boxes, safe from spoilage. Children run through passageways, connecting the homes, while adults repair tools or craft ornaments. Life is difficult, but the people are resilient and resourceful. Then conditions begin to change. The sea creeps closer each year, storms grow more violent, and the soil becomes less fertile. Tensions rise as food grows scarce. One day, a decision is made. The community packs what they can carry and walks away, leaving behind the structures that had sheltered them for generations. Over time, wind and sand cover the empty village until it vanishes from view, waiting for a future storm to uncover it again. The lack of clear answers keeps Skara Brae an intriguing puzzle. While other Neolithic communities expanded and developed more complex social systems, this one disappeared. Why did they abandon their village while others adapted and grew? Some researchers suggest that geographic isolation limited their options. Others think external pressures, like shifting trade routes or conflict with neighboring groups, played a role. Without written records, these questions remain open. Skara Brae offers a rare and detailed look at daily life thousands of years ago. Most ancient sites are fragmentary, with only bits and pieces left to study. Here, entire homes remain, complete with furniture and tools. It provides a glimpse into how people cooked, slept, stored food, and moved through their space. It shows that even in a harsh environment, people could create a well-organized community. At the same time, the site reminds us how fragile such communities can be. A change in climate, the loss of resources, or a social shift can bring even a strong settlement to an end. The storm of 1850 revealed more than just stone walls. It opened a window into a world long gone, a world where people built sturdy homes, traded with distant lands, and faced challenges both familiar and mysterious. Skara Brae continues to raise questions that we may never fully answer, but it also provides a powerful story about human resilience and the forces that shape our past. Çatalhöyük, in what is now central Turkey, challenges our ideas of when cities began. Around 9,000 years ago, people there built one of the world's first dense settlements, long before writing, metal tools, or formal governments existed. Excavations led by archaeologist Ian Hodder revealed a landscape unlike anything we expect from an early community. The site contains tightly packed houses, built so close together that there were no streets or open squares. To move around, people climbed onto their roofs and used ladders to enter through openings above each home. From a distance, the settlement would have looked like a single, continuous block of mud brick, with people walking across the top like paths on a hive. The interior of each house tells a story of family life and ritual. Beneath the packed clay floors, archaeologists found burials. These were not random. Isotopic and DNA studies showed that the individuals buried together were related by blood, forming clear family groups. Over time, generations were layered one on top of the other. In some homes, as many as 60 people were buried beneath the same floor, suggesting that the house itself was more than shelter. It was a physical link between the living and the dead. When families gathered to eat, sleep, or talk, they did so above the remains of their ancestors. This practice suggests that identity and memory were tied to the home. Instead of a cemetery outside the settlement, every house became a sacred space. The decision to bury the dead inside domestic spaces is difficult for us to fully understand. It might have been a way to keep ancestors close, to ensure their guidance and protection. It may also have reinforced ownership. A house containing the bones of past generations could serve as proof that a family belonged there. Imagine sitting around a hearth, sharing food, while knowing that beneath your feet were the people who had built that very house. The spiritual weight of that setting would have been immense. Evidence of painted walls and symbolic objects in these spaces suggests that rituals took place regularly, perhaps to honor the dead or to mark key events like births, harvests, or seasonal changes. The density of Çatalhöyük creates another puzzle. People chose to live in very close quarters far earlier than we would expect. In most parts of the world at this time, small villages were scattered and separated by open land. Here, thousands of people gathered into one compact settlement. This raises questions about why such urban living appeared so early. There is no evidence of kings, priests, or other ruling figures to organize it. The houses are roughly the same size, and there are no palaces or large temples. This suggests a system without clear social hierarchy. Each household seems to have been largely self-sufficient, yet deeply connected to others through shared practices and mutual dependence. Living without streets or open squares would have created unique challenges. Movement happened across rooftops, with ladders as the main entry and exit points. To reach a neighbor's home, one would climb up onto the roof and cross several others, navigating a maze of flat surfaces. Without public gathering spaces, conflict management must have been handled differently than in later cities. There are no clear signs of warfare within the settlement, such as fortifications or mass graves. This absence hints that disputes were resolved through negotiation, ritual, or social pressure rather than open violence. However, with so many people living in such proximity, tensions must have been frequent. The fact that the community lasted for many generations suggests that they developed systems to maintain peace, even if those systems leave little trace for us to see. The way houses were rebuilt over time adds to the sense of continuity. When a house became too worn, it was not abandoned. Instead, a new house was built directly on top of the old one, layer by layer, creating a mound that rose higher each generation. This cycle of rebuilding kept families rooted in the same place for centuries. It also meant that each home was a physical archive of memory, with the past literally forming the foundation of the present. Walls often carried paintings of animals, hunting scenes, or geometric shapes. These images may have been connected to myths or teachings passed down through families. One ongoing debate concerns whether Çatalhöyük was a permanent urban hub or a seasonal gathering point. Some researchers suggest that not all inhabitants lived there year-round. Instead, groups might have come together at certain times of the year to trade, celebrate rituals, and bury their dead. This would explain why the settlement could grow so large without evidence of centralized rule. Others argue that the continuous rebuilding of houses shows permanent residence. If people only visited seasonally, the layers of construction would not be so consistent. The truth may be a mix, with a core group living there full-time and others arriving for specific events. Imagine the experience of daily life in such a place. At dawn, families would climb their ladders to the rooftops, moving carefully to avoid stumbling into neighbors' chimneys or storage pits. Women might carry baskets of grain from roof to roof, while men returned from hunting trips with animal carcasses. Children played on the flat surfaces, darting across the maze of homes. Inside, someone tended a hearth, the smoke rising through the roof opening. Beneath their feet lay generations of family members, silent witnesses to the day's events. The scale of this early settlement forces us to reconsider assumptions about the rise of cities. Normally, we link urban growth to advancements like metal tools, writing, or organized governments. At Çatalhöyük, none of these existed. Yet people still came together in large numbers and created a thriving, complex community. This suggests that social bonds and shared beliefs can drive urbanization even without centralized authority. The network of families, bound by burial practices and ritual life, seems to have been strong enough to hold the community together. Evidence of trade has been found in the form of obsidian, a volcanic glass used for tools, which came from distant regions. This indicates that the settlement was part of wider exchange networks. Such trade may have brought not only goods but also ideas, influencing the symbols painted on walls and the objects placed with the dead. Still, much about these connections remains unclear. Were they occasional exchanges or regular, organized routes? Without written records, we can only guess at the flow of materials and stories between Çatalhöyük and other communities. Çatalhöyük shows us a world where life and death, home and ritual, were deeply intertwined. The decision to bury ancestors beneath the floors of daily living spaces speaks to a worldview very different from our own. The absence of clear leaders or public buildings challenges our ideas about how large groups of people can live together. This ancient settlement continues to pose questions about why people gathered, how they managed conflict, and what beliefs shaped their choices. Its dense maze of houses, layered over centuries, remains a silent witness to one of the earliest experiments in urban life. In the dry desert plains of southern Peru, enormous designs stretch across the landscape. These are the Nazca Lines, created by ancient people who lived long before modern roads or machines. At ground level, they look like long, shallow trenches carved into the surface, but from above, they form giant figures, animals like hummingbirds and monkeys, geometric shapes like spirals and trapezoids, and straight lines that run for kilometers. For a long time, only pilots and researchers with planes could see the full scope of these drawings. Today, drones and satellite imaging have given scientists new ways to explore the desert, revealing geoglyphs that had been hidden by time and erosion. These recent discoveries show that the lines were not all made at once. Instead, different groups created them over many centuries. This suggests that the meanings and purposes of the lines changed as cultures rose and fell, each leaving their mark on the desert floor. The way the lines were made seems simple but required careful planning. Workers scraped away the thin layer of dark stones that covered the desert's surface, exposing the lighter soil underneath. The contrast between the dark and light materials made the figures visible. Because the desert climate is so dry and windless, the designs have lasted for more than 1,000 years. The simplicity of the tools involved, stakes, ropes, and human labor, makes the precision of the work even more impressive. Some figures stretch for several kilometers, and their shapes are perfectly proportioned. This level of accuracy would have required coordination and clear communication. Imagine a team of people standing on a flat, empty plain, each holding a rope attached to a central stake, walking in a careful arc to form a perfect circle or curve. Without aerial views, they would have relied entirely on measurements and memory. The fact that so many figures were completed without visible mistakes shows a high degree of organization and skill. The purpose of the Nazca Lines remains one of archaeology's most debated mysteries. One idea is that the lines acted as ritual pathways. People may have walked along them during ceremonies, with processions following the long straight lines or spiraling shapes. In this view, the figures were not meant to be seen all at once, but experienced through movement. Walking the lines might have symbolized a journey or a prayer, connecting participants with spiritual forces. Another theory links the lines to the region's most pressing challenge: water. The Nazca lived in an extremely dry environment where survival depended on managing scarce water sources. Some researchers believe that the designs were part of rituals meant to encourage rainfall or honor the spirits that controlled water. Certain shapes, like trapezoids, may have pointed toward underground aquifers or canals. This would explain why the figures often appear near water-related features like springs or ancient wells. A different line of thought suggests that the designs functioned as astronomical calendars. Certain straight lines seem to align with the positions of the sun and stars during solstices or other key times of the year. This could have helped the Nazca track the seasons, which was vital for planting and harvesting crops. If this theory is correct, the desert floor would have served as a vast, open-air observatory. People standing on the ground might not have been able to see the figures fully, but they could have used specific points to mark celestial events. These alignments could also have had spiritual meaning, blending practical knowledge with religious belief. One striking feature of the Nazca Lines is that many of the designs can only be appreciated from high above. For centuries, people on the ground would have seen only fragments, perhaps a curve here or a straight edge there. This raises an intriguing question. Who were the figures meant for? Some suggest they were messages to the gods, visible only to divine beings looking down from the sky. In this interpretation, the act of creating the lines was a form of communication, a way to send prayers upward. Others argue that the full figures did not need to be seen by human eyes at all. The power lay in their creation and the rituals surrounding them, not in viewing the completed image. It is also possible that people had ways of gaining a partial aerial perspective, such as climbing nearby hills or building temporary wooden towers, though no firm evidence for such towers has been found. Consider the challenge of building a figure several kilometers long without modern tools. To draw a hummingbird with perfect proportions, A team would have to agree on exact measurements and maintain those measurements over a vast area. One method might have involved laying out a small model on the ground, then scaling it up using ropes and stakes. Each worker would take a position marked by a stake, pulling the rope tight to ensure straight lines or consistent curves. Communication would have been essential. A single misstep could ruin the symmetry of the design. Coordinating this effort across multiple teams suggests a level of social organization that we do not fully understand. The Nazca culture left no written records, so we must infer their methods from the patterns themselves and from tools found nearby. The discovery of new geoglyphs using drone technology has deepened the mystery rather than solved it. Some of the newly identified figures are older and simpler, while others are later and more complex. This suggests that different groups may have added to the landscape over time, each with their own purposes. A simple line might have marked a pathway for early rituals, while later generations created animal figures tied to different beliefs. The overlapping layers of design show a desert that was constantly being reshaped by human hands. Imagine standing in the middle of the plain as one of these figures was being made. The sun beats down and the horizon stretches endlessly in every direction. Around you, dozens of people move in careful patterns, scraping away stones and calling out measurements. You cannot see the final design, only the section you are working on. Yet you trust that when it is finished, it will form a perfect image. Perhaps you believe this work will bring rain, ensure a good harvest, or honor a god. When the figure is complete, you and others might walk its outline in a solemn procession, knowing that somewhere above, in the realm of the spirits, the full shape is clear. The Nazca Lines force us to think about communication and meaning on a grand scale. These figures are too large to be accidental. They represent deliberate choices made by people who devoted time and energy to shaping their world. Whether the lines served as ritual paths, calendars, or messages to the sky, they reveal a society deeply connected to its environment and to forces beyond the visible. The desert preserves their work, silent and vast, leaving us to wonder how such monumental designs came to be and what stories they once told. Beneath the streets of modern Malta lies a vast underground structure known as the Hal Saflieni Hypogeum. Carved entirely from solid limestone thousands of years ago, it stretches across multiple levels, connected by narrow passages and chambers. Stepping inside feels like entering another world. The air is still, the light dim, and the walls bear the marks of tools wielded by ancient hands. It is a place of both engineering skill and mystery, created by a community whose beliefs and intentions we can only guess at. Archaeologists have identified areas for burial, ritual, and gathering, but the full story of this complex remains hidden in stone and silence. One chamber, called the Oracle Room, has drawn particular attention. Modern acoustic tests show that when a person chants at certain low frequencies inside this space, the sound does not remain in the room. It travels through the entire structure, making the walls and floors vibrate. The effect is not subtle. Those standing nearby can feel the sound in their bodies, like a deep hum passing through their bones. This discovery suggests that rituals may have been designed to use sound as a tool. A single voice could have reached hundreds of people spread across different chambers, amplifying the presence of a leader or priest. The sensation would have been awe-inspiring, perhaps even overwhelming. Imagine standing in darkness while a deep, resonant chant seems to come from everywhere at once. In such a moment, participants might have felt they were hearing the voice of a god or ancestor rather than a human being. Whether these acoustic effects were deliberately planned or discovered by chance is still debated. Some researchers think the builders carefully shaped the chambers to produce these results. The Oracle Room's smooth alleys, ranked designed to capture the bodies and tools unimaginable, incidents and victims. Curved surfaces and precise dimensions seem too deliberate to be accidental. If so, the hypogeum may represent one of the earliest examples of sound being used for religious or political purposes. A leader who understood how to control such an environment could command great power. By using sound to create a shared emotional experience, they could reinforce beliefs or authority without needing words. Others argue that the resonance may have been a fortunate coincidence later incorporated into rituals. In this view, the builders were skilled stoneworkers but not acoustic engineers. The truth may lie somewhere in between. Even if they did not fully understand the physics, repeated experience would have taught them how certain shapes and spaces affected sound. Among the remains found in the hypogeum, some of the most striking are skulls with unusual shapes. Out of the roughly 7,000 individuals buried there, a small number had elongated crania. This kind of skull shape can occur naturally, but it can also be created through deliberate cranial binding. In this practice, infants' heads are gently shaped over time using cloth or boards. Cultures across the world have used cranial binding to mark status, group identity, or spiritual beliefs. Similar practices are known from ancient Egypt and other parts of the Mediterranean. The presence of these elongated skulls in Malta raises intriguing questions. Were these individuals part of an elite group, set apart by birth or ritual? Did they come from distant lands where cranial shaping was common, or was this a local tradition? The skulls have fueled speculation about connections between Malta and other ancient cultures. Trade across the Mediterranean was already active in this period, with goods like obsidian, shells, and stone tools moving between islands and coasts. It is possible that ideas traveled along the same routes. A ritual practice like cranial shaping might have been adopted through contact with neighboring societies. Alternatively, these skulls could represent a small group of migrants who brought their customs with them. Without DNA evidence linking these individuals to specific regions, their origins remain uncertain. The scale of the hypogeum itself poses another puzzle. Malta is a relatively small island, yet its people managed to carve a sprawling complex entirely underground. This would have required enormous labor, careful planning, and a reliable food supply to support workers during construction. There are no signs of metal tools from this period, which means the excavation was done with stone and bone implements. Even with simple tools, the walls are smooth and symmetrical, suggesting a high level of skill. Organizing such a project implies a structured community. Workers needed to be fed, tools repaired, and debris removed. Someone had to design the layout and coordinate the teams. Yet, like other Neolithic sites, the hypogeum shows no clear evidence of kings or centralized rulers. Power may have been spread across families or clans rather than concentrated in a single authority. Consider the experience of those who built it. Day after day, they descended into the dim, echoing spaces to chip away at limestone. Oil lamps flickered, casting shifting shadows on the walls. The sound of hammering and scraping would have been constant, mixed with the voices of workers calling to one another through the narrow passages. As chambers expanded, they became places for both the living and the dead. Burials took place even as construction continued, blending practical labor with sacred duty. Over time, the site became not just a physical structure, but a symbol of communal identity. The hypogeum's role in wider Mediterranean networks is another area of mystery. Artifacts found within it include items made from materials not native to Malta, such as certain types of stone and shells. These suggest trade links with distant regions. Cultural exchange may have extended beyond goods to include stories, rituals, and technologies. Perhaps the people of Malta learned new building techniques from travelers or shared their own practices with others. The Mediterranean has always been a crossroads, and the hypogeum fits into this pattern of movement and interaction. One can imagine a scene in the oracle room during a ritual. The chamber is packed with people, their faces lit by a few glowing lamps. A figure steps forward and begins to chant. The sound swells, filling every corner of the space, making the very walls seem alive. Those present feel the vibration in their chests, a shared heartbeat connecting them to one another and to the unseen world of spirits and ancestors. In such a moment, belief would have been reinforced through direct experience. The power of the ritual did not come only from words or symbols, but from the physical reality of sound and stone working together. The hypogeum remains a testament to what human communities can achieve with limited resources and immense determination. Its carved chambers, resonant spaces, and carefully placed burials speak of a society deeply connected to both the physical and spiritual worlds. Even as modern science uncovers more details, the full meaning of this underground temple continues to elude us. It stands as a reminder that the past holds complexities we are only beginning to understand, shaped by voices that still seem to echo beneath the earth. High on the windswept Altiplano of Bolivia lie the ruins of Pumapunku, a site that continues to puzzle archaeologists and engineers alike. The remains are scattered across a wide area, with massive stone blocks lying broken and tilted as if a once great structure had been violently dismantled. At first glance, the site appears chaotic, but a closer look reveals extraordinary craftsmanship. Among the ruins are the famous H-shaped stones, each cut with a precision that seems out of place for a culture without metal tools, wheels, or written records. These stones fit together with standardized dimensions, almost like pieces of a giant puzzle. Recent laser scans have confirmed that the angles and edges are consistent to an astonishing degree, suggesting planning and execution at a very high level. Experimental archaeology has shown that it is possible to shape these stones using simple tools made of harder stone, wood, and sand as an abrasive. A single cut can be reproduced in a controlled setting by hand. The difficulty lies not in making one perfect cut, but in doing so repeatedly and at scale. At Pumapunku, hundreds of blocks were shaped to match exact measurements. This required a system for marking, measuring, and checking progress. Yet no written plans or design records have been found. The builders relied entirely on memory, verbal instructions, and practice passed down through generations. How they achieved such uniformity remains a central mystery. It is the difference between a single craftsman carving a decorative object and an entire team coordinating to produce a monumental complex. The scale of the stones adds to the puzzle. Some blocks weigh over 100 tons and had to be quarried miles away from the site. Moving them would have been a monumental task in itself. Without wheels, the builders likely relied on sledges, ropes, and manpower. On the flat, rocky landscape of the Altiplano, hauling these massive blocks would have required planning and discipline. Imagine groups of workers coordinating their movements, chanting to stay in rhythm as they dragged a stone across the plain. Wooden rollers might have been used on smoother sections, while ramps and earthen platforms could have helped in lifting and positioning the blocks. Even with these methods, the effort involved is staggering. It suggests a highly organized society capable of mobilizing large groups for a shared goal. The H-shaped stones are especially striking because of their complex interlocking design. Each stone features multiple notches, grooves, and protrusions, allowing them to connect with others in precise configurations. This type of joinery is seen in later Inca architecture, where stones fit together so tightly that even a blade of grass cannot slip between them. Some researchers see Pumapunku as a direct precursor to the Inca style, evidence of a continuous tradition of stoneworking in the Andes. Others argue that the site represents a separate, earlier culture with its own techniques and ideas. The differences in style and construction methods make it difficult to draw a direct line between Pumapunku and later Inca structures like those at Cusco or Machu Picchu. If the connection exists, it may be indirect, with knowledge passed along in fragments rather than a clear lineage. The possibility of lost technologies often comes up when discussing Pumapunku. Some theories suggest that the builders had techniques now completely forgotten. These need not have been advanced in a modern sense. For example, they might have used clever methods of leverage, alignment, or stone softening that left no trace for archaeologists to find. Consider how modern concrete casting works. A wooden mold creates a uniform shape. If ancient builders had a similar approach, perhaps using clay molds and a process for shaping stone dust mixed with water, they could have produced standardized blocks without needing to cut each one individually. While no evidence for such a process has been confirmed, it shows how ancient knowledge could vanish over time, leaving only the results for us to interpret. Coordination is another major question. A project of this magnitude required leadership and planning. Workers needed food, tools, and shelter, while tasks had to be divided and scheduled. Without writing, instructions would have been given orally, relying on repetition and shared understanding. Picture a master builder standing before a group, explaining the layout of a complex structure using gestures and models. Each team would then focus on a specific task: quarrying, shaping, transporting, or fitting the stones. The success of such a system depended on trust and memory. A single mistake could disrupt the entire project, so training and tradition were vital. The precision of the work suggests that measurement systems were in place, even if they were not recorded. Standardized units could have been based on body parts, like the length of a forearm or hand, or on simple tools like marked sticks or cords. By repeating these units consistently, builders could maintain uniformity across large distances. Laser scans show that certain dimensions recur again and again, implying a shared set of rules understood by everyone involved. This level of standardization is impressive because it shows abstract thinking, the ability to imagine a perfect form and then reproduce it in heavy, unyielding stone. The environment added to the challenge. Pumapunku sits at an elevation of nearly 4,000 meters, where the air is thin and the weather unpredictable. Workers faced cold winds, sudden storms, and limited growing seasons for food. Supporting a large labor force under these conditions would have required careful management. Surplus crops had to be stored and distributed, while seasonal work patterns dictated when construction could take place. The site itself likely served both practical and ceremonial purposes. Its layout suggests gathering spaces as well as restricted areas, hinting at rituals that reinforced social bonds and justified the enormous effort involved. When we look at the ruins today, it is easy to focus only on the stones and forget the human side of the story. Imagine the scene when the complex was active. Teams of workers move in rhythm, dragging a block into place, while others carve intricate notches with stone hammers and sand. Overseers check measurements by sight and touch, making adjustments before the next piece is added. At night, fires burn across the camp, and stories are told of ancestors and gods who demand perfection. Each block is more than a building material. It is a symbol of shared identity and purpose. The collapse of the society that built Pumapunku remains as mysterious as its construction. At some point, the project was abandoned, leaving unfinished stones scattered around the site. Later cultures, including the Inca, reused some of these stones but did not continue the original plan. This interruption suggests a major disruption, perhaps environmental change, conflict, or disease. With no written records, we are left with only physical traces to piece together the narrative. Pumapunku challenges our assumptions about what ancient societies could achieve. The precision of its stones, the complexity of its design, and the scale of its construction show that knowledge can exist without writing, and technology can take forms we no longer recognize. The site stands as a puzzle carved in stone, offering glimpses of a world where human ingenuity shaped the landscape in ways that still defy easy explanation. In the 1960s, a man in the Cappadocia region of Turkey knocked down a wall in his basement while doing renovations. Behind it, he expected to find more space for storage. Instead, he discovered a narrow tunnel leading into darkness. What he had opened was the entrance to an underground city that no one living in the village had known existed. Archaeologists we called in, and what they found astonished them. The site, now known as Derinkuyu, contained hundreds of rooms connected by twisting passages that extended deep into the earth. Over time, they mapped more than a dozen levels, with chambers for living, storage, worship, and defense. It became clear that this was not a simple cave system, but a carefully engineered city, built to hide and protect large groups of people. The deeper levels show advanced planning. Vertical shafts bring air down from the surface, ensuring that even at the lowest levels, people could breathe comfortably. These shafts also doubled as communication channels, allowing sound to travel between levels. There were wells for water, cleverly placed so that they could be accessed from different floors without exposing the city to outside threats. Waste systems were integrated into the design, directing runoff and refuse away from living areas to maintain hygiene. The engineers understood how to keep thousands of people alive underground for long periods of time. The rolling stone doors are some of the most striking features. Each door was a massive circular slab that could be rolled into place to seal off a passage. They were designed to lock from the inside, meaning defenders could retreat deeper into the city and block intruders at every turn. Once in position, a single person could hold off many attackers, as the doors were almost impossible to move without leverage or tools. Who built the first chambers remains a mystery. The volcanic rock in Cappadocia is relatively soft and easy to carve, which makes it ideal for tunnels and rooms, but it also requires careful reinforcement to prevent collapse. The oldest sections of Derinkuyu show different carving styles than the later expansions, suggesting that construction happened in stages over centuries. Some historians believe the first chambers were carved by early Phrygian groups around the 8th or 7th century BCE. Others argue that the origins go back even further, possibly to the Hittites or earlier Bronze Age cultures. Without clear evidence, it is difficult to assign a definite date. What is clear is that successive generations added to the network, responding to changing needs and threats. The reasons for building such a vast underground refuge are still debated. One possibility is defense. Cappadocia sits at a crossroads between empires and trade routes. Armies and raiders passed through the region for thousands of years. For small communities, hiding underground would have offered safety during invasions. The rolling stone doors, narrow passages, and hidden ventilation shafts support this idea. Entire villages could disappear from sight, leaving attackers confused and unable to capture them. Another theory is that the city had religious or ceremonial functions. Some chambers have altars and evidence of worship, suggesting that certain spaces may have been used for rituals. In this view, the underground world symbolized a connection to the spiritual realm, with different levels representing stages of initiation or belief. A third possibility is practical. The city might have been used seasonally, providing shelter during extreme weather or food storage during harsh winters. Archaeologists often consider that the truth may involve a mix of these functions. A space built for one purpose can evolve over time. A refuge may later become a permanent settlement, or a sacred chamber may gain defensive features during a period of conflict. The long history of Cappadocia supports this idea. The region saw waves of migration, trade, war, and cultural exchange. Each group that occupied the area would have left its mark on Derinkuyu, expanding and adapting it to suit their needs. Maintaining air quality underground was a technical challenge. The builders created a system of vertical shafts and hidden vents that worked together to circulate fresh air. Some shafts are wide enough to serve as chimneys, allowing smoke and stale air to rise while pulling clean air downward. This would have been essential when fires were burning for cooking and warmth. Without constant airflow, the deeper levels would quickly become uninhabitable. The fact that people could live there for extended periods shows a sophisticated understanding of airflow and environmental control. Water was equally important. Certain wells were deliberately dug so they did not connect directly to the surface, protecting them from contamination or sabotage during sieges. Access to clean water meant that the inhabitants could survive even when cut off from the outside world. Excavating so deeply without causing collapses required both experience and strategy. The volcanic rock, while soft, can fracture if too much weight is removed in one area. Builders left supporting columns and thick walls between rooms. Passages were often narrow and curved, distributing stress across the structure. As the city expanded, older levels were reinforced or reshaped to handle the growing network above them. The success of this system can be seen in the fact that much of Derinkuyu remains stable today, despite centuries of abandonment. Imagine life inside the underground city during a time of crisis. Families descend through hidden entrances, bringing food, livestock, and supplies. The rolling stone doors close behind them with a heavy thud. Inside, the air smells of earth and firelight flickers on the walls. Children sleep in alcoves carved into the rock, while adults gather in communal rooms to share meals and plan defenses. The low ceilings and narrow corridors create an intimate world, separate from the dangers above. For weeks or months, life continues in this subterranean maze, sustained by the careful planning of those who built it. When the threat passes, the community emerges, leaving the city silent and dark until it is needed again. The rediscovery of Derinkuyu has changed how we think about ancient engineering. It shows that complex planning and social organization were possible without writing or advanced tools. Every level, from the topmost chamber to the deepest well, reflects decisions made by people who understood their environment and their enemies. The rolling doors, ventilation shafts, and storage rooms are not just technical achievements, but evidence of a way of life shaped by constant threat and adaptation. Even now, only a portion of Derinkuyu has been fully explored. Other underground cities in the region connect to it through long tunnels, forming a hidden network beneath Cappadocia. These connections suggest cooperation between settlements, perhaps even a shared system of refuge. Whether used for defense, ritual, or seasonal living, Derinkuyu stands as proof of what a determined community can create when survival depends on disappearing into the earth. Its passages remain a silent record of lives lived in darkness, built by generations whose names are lost, but whose work endures. Off the coast of Pohnpei, a small island in Micronesia, lies a city built on the ocean itself. Non-Madal stretches across a lagoon, a network of artificial islets connected by narrow canals. From above, it looks like a floating grid, with waterways serving as streets. The remains of towering stone walls and massive platforms rise from foundations made of coral. It is a city unlike any other in the ancient world, created by a society that had no metal tools, wheels, or modern machinery. The effort required to build it has long puzzled researchers. The site speaks of ambition and power, but also of mystery, as the city was eventually abandoned and left to the sea. The most striking feature of Non-Madal is its use of basalt columns. These stones, shaped by volcanic processes, naturally form into long, hexagonal shafts that resemble giant logs of rock. Some of them weigh several tons. Geological studies have shown that they were quarried from nearby islands rather than the site itself. Moving these massive stones across tidal waters would have been a monumental challenge. Experiments suggest that raft-like platforms made of large logs could have supported the weight, but stabilizing such heavy cargo in open water is no simple task. Imagine a crew of workers pushing a raft loaded with a 10-ton basalt column, guiding it across shifting tides and strong currents while trying to keep it balanced. A single wave could tilt the load and send it crashing into the sea. This would have required extraordinary skill and coordination, as well as a deep understanding of the local marine environment. Once the stones reached the site, they had to be lifted and stacked with precision. The builders created walls by laying the columns horizontally in interlocking layers. Much like logs in a wooden cabin, the tallest structures rise over 6 meters high, with individual stones carefully positioned to create stability. All of this was done on soft, shifting coral foundations that had to be reinforced to support the weight. The precision and scale suggest generations of accumulated knowledge. While modern experiments have shown that small teams can move and position individual stones using ropes, ramps, and leverage, scaling up to the size of Non-Madal remains difficult to fully explain. The project required not only technical skill, but also centralized organization to coordinate labor across multiple islands. Why this society invested so heavily in constructing a stone city in the middle of the ocean is another unresolved question. Oral traditions speak of the Çatalhöyük dynasty, a ruling family that established its power on Pohnpei and sought to control surrounding islands. Building Non-Madal may have been both a practical and symbolic act. The canals allowed for easy transport by canoe, while the layout physically separated the rulers from the general population. Living on these isolated islets reinforced their authority and created a sense of mystery and control. The massive stone walls were not defensive in the traditional sense. as there are no signs of fortifications or battles. Instead, they projected power through sheer scale. The act of mobilizing thousands of workers to build and maintain the city was itself a display of dominance. The location also posed serious challenges. Fresh water was scarce on the islets, meaning that supplies had to be carried in regularly from the main island. Food production would have been difficult on such limited land, so the inhabitants relied on tribute from surrounding communities. The ocean setting left the city vulnerable to storms, flooding, and erosion. Even today, strong waves and rising tides eat away at the structures. Maintaining non-modal would have been a constant struggle against natural forces. The decision to build there suggests that symbolic and political considerations outweighed practical concerns. It may have been intended as a sacred space or a ritual center as much as a seat of government. Life within non-modal would have been highly structured. The canals served as streets, with canoes gliding silently between buildings. Each islet had a specific function. Some held residences for priests and rulers, while others were used for rituals, storage, or burial. The sound of waves would have been ever-present, mingling with the voices of workers and the calls of birds. At night, the city would have glimmered with torchlight reflecting off the water. The separation between islands created a sense of order, with clear boundaries marking who belonged where. For commoners arriving by canoe to deliver tribute or attend ceremonies, the towering stone walls must have seemed both awe-inspiring and intimidating. The eventual decline of non-modal remains unclear. Oral histories describe the fall of the Çatalhöyük dynasty in terms of rebellion. According to these stories, oppressive rulers demanded heavy tribute and strict obedience, leading to widespread resentment. A warrior named Çatalhöyük is said to have led a revolt that overthrew the dynasty. Archaeologists have found evidence of abandonment, but not of widespread destruction, suggesting a gradual decline rather than a sudden catastrophe. Environmental factors may also have played a role. As the city grew, the strain on resources would have increased. Storm damage, erosion, or changes in trade routes could have weakened the system. In such a fragile setting, even small shifts in climate or politics could have tipped the balance. The complexity of non-modal raises questions about the level of social organization needed to create it. Mobilizing workers from across multiple islands required strong leadership and a shared belief system. Tribute would have been collected in the form of food, materials, and labor. Ceremonies and rituals likely reinforced the ruler's authority, binding people together through a common worldview. The city itself may have acted as a stage for these rituals, with its canals and walls guiding movement and creating a sense of spectacle. In this way, architecture and politics were deeply intertwined. Consider the scene during a major ritual. Canoes glide through narrow waterways, their paddles slicing the water in unison. Drums echo off the stone walls, and smoke from torches drifts upward into the humid night air. On a central islet, priests perform ceremonies in front of the ruling family, while crowds watch from surrounding platforms. The city becomes a living symbol of power, its very structure reinforcing the hierarchy of the society. Building and maintaining non-modal was not only about stone and labor, but about shaping the way people experienced authority. Today, the ruins sit partially submerged, their outlines softened by centuries of tides. The basalt columns still stand in neat rows, defying the waves that lap at their bases. Walking among them, it is easy to imagine the sound of paddles in the canals and the sight of fires burning on the platforms. Yet the exact techniques used to move and position these stones remain uncertain. Modern experiments can reproduce some steps, but the full process, especially at the scale required, remains elusive. Non-modal leaves us with questions not only about engineering, but about human ambition. It shows how a society on a small, isolated island once reached outward, harnessing both the sea and the stone to create a city that still stirs wonder. In the Supe Valley of coastal Peru, the ruins of Parral rise from the desert like ghosts of a forgotten age. The site is filled with monumental pyramids, sunken plazas, and broad staircases, all made of stone and earth. For many years, scholars believe that large-scale urban centers in the Americas began much later, closer to the time of the Maya or Inca. That assumption changed when archaeologist Ruth Shady and her team used radiocarbon dating to study plant fibers and other materials found at Karl. The results shocked the academic world. The pyramids date back to around 2600 BCE, making Karl one of the oldest known cities in the Americas, as old as the earliest cities of Mesopotamia and Egypt. This discovery forced historians to rethink the timeline of civilization in the Western Hemisphere. Karl's age is not its only surprising feature. Unlike many ancient cities, it shows no evidence of warfare during its early phases. There are no walls built for defense, no weapons scattered among the ruins, and no signs of violent destruction. This raises a major question. Why would a society invest so much labor in constructing monumental architecture without the presence of military power to protect it? In many parts of the world, large building projects emerge from the ambitions of kings or rulers who rely on armies to control resources and labor. At Karl, the driving force seems to have been different. The massive pyramids and ceremonial spaces suggest that religion and ritual, rather than war, brought people together. The layout of the city reinforces this idea. Large plazas sit at the heart of the settlement, surrounded by pyramids and residential areas. These plazas appear to have been gathering places where thousands of people could participate in ceremonies. The structures were not just symbols of authority, but functional spaces for shared activities. Imagine the scene during a ritual. Crowds assembled in the sunken plaza, music echoing from drums and flutes, smoke rising from offerings burned at the top of a pyramid. Such events would have created a sense of unity, binding people through shared belief rather than fear of military force. Karl's economy relied heavily on trade and agriculture. The Supe Valley provided fertile land for growing crops like squash, beans, and cotton. Cotton was especially important because it allowed the production of fishing nets, which supported a thriving coastal economy. Communities near the ocean provided dried fish, while inland groups grew crops. The exchange of goods created a network of mutual dependence. Archaeologists have found evidence of trade extending far beyond the valley, including exotic items like spondylus shells and colorful minerals. These goods suggest that Karl was part of a larger cultural web stretching along the coast and into the highlands. One of the most puzzling aspects of Karl is the absence of widespread ceramics in its early phases. In many ancient societies, pottery plays a key role in cooking, storage, and trade. Its absence at Karl challenges assumptions about how urban life develops. Instead of clay vessels, the people of Karl used baskets, gourds, and textiles to store and transport goods. This reliance on perishable materials leaves fewer artifacts for archaeologists to study, making it harder to understand daily life. The lack of pottery also raises questions about technological choices. Did the people of Karl deliberately avoid ceramics, or had they not yet adopted the practice? Either possibility reshapes our view of how innovation spreads. The construction techniques at Karl show careful planning. Builders filled woven bags with rocks and used them to create stable pyramid cores. These bags acted like giant building blocks, easy to carry and stack. Once the core was in place, workers covered it with layers of stone and earth. This method allowed rapid construction while reducing the risk of collapse in the region's earthquake-prone environment. The largest pyramid, known as the Pyramide Mayor, dominates the site, standing as a testament to the skill and organization of its builders. Coordinating such projects required a system for managing resources and labor. While no written records have been found, archaeologists suspect that early forms of record-keeping existed. The Inca, who rose thousands of years later, used quipu cords, bundles of knotted strings, to track goods, population numbers, and administrative details. Some researchers believe that Karl's people may have used a similar system. If so, their records would have been made of cotton or other organic materials that do not survive well over time. The idea of textile-based accounting fits with the importance of cotton in their economy, and suggests a level of abstraction and planning we rarely associate with early urban societies. The question of leadership at Karl is complex. There is no evidence of palaces or elite residences that clearly stand apart from other buildings. This contrasts with places like Egypt, where monumental tombs and temples reflect centralized power. At Karl, authority may have been more diffuse. Religious specialists, merchants, and local leaders could have shared responsibility for decision-making. The city's monumental structures, rather than glorifying individuals, seem to emphasize communal participation. This does not mean there was no hierarchy. Building pyramids and organizing trade networks would have required coordination and leadership. The difference lies in how that power was expressed. Instead of military conquest or lavish royal tombs, Karl's power may have been rooted in belief systems and reciprocal exchange. Environmental factors shaped daily life. The Supe Valley's rivers provided irrigation, but they also posed risks of flooding or drought. Maintaining stable food supplies would have been a constant concern. The absence of defensive structures suggests that external threats were less pressing than internal stability. Communities may have invested their energy in managing the landscape and maintaining cooperative relationships. Large-scale rituals could have played a role in this process. By bringing people together for shared ceremonies, leaders reinforced social bonds and encouraged cooperation. These gatherings may have also served practical purposes, such as redistributing goods or settling disputes. Imagine a typical day during the city's peak. Farmers work in the fields along the river, harvesting cotton and food crops. Traders arrive from the coast, their baskets filled with dried fish and shells. In the central plaza, a group prepares for an evening ceremony, arranging offerings and tuning reed flutes. As the sun sets, the community gathers. Fires burn atop the pyramids, casting long shadows across the plaza. Music and chanting rise into the night, linking the people to one another and to the forces they worship. In this way, religion and daily life merge, sustaining the city's rhythm. The discovery of Karl also challenges assumptions about how early civilizations formed. In many parts of the world, urban centers grow out of competition and conflict. Leaders consolidate power through warfare, and cities emerge as centers of control. Karl offers a different model. Its growth seems to have been driven by cooperation, trade, and ritual. This does not mean life was idyllic or free of tension, but it suggests that complex societies can arise through pathways other than violence. Over time, changes in climate or resource availability may have strained this balance. As river flows shifted or trade routes altered, the city's cohesion could have weakened. Without written records, the details of Karl's decline remain unknown. What endures are the pyramids, plazas, and stairways, silent witnesses to a civilization that flourished at the dawn of urban life. Through careful study, archaeologists continue to piece together the story of a society that built monumental structures not for war or conquest, but for the shared experience of ritual and community. High in the Peruvian Andes, where mountain valleys twist between towering peaks, stand the ruins of Chavin de Huantar. At first glance, the site resembles many ancient temples, with stone staircases, plazas, and carved walls. But beneath its surface lies a network of tunnels and chambers unlike anything else in the region. These underground passages were not meant for storage or defense. They were carefully designed to create an immersive experience of sound, light, and movement. Researchers today believe that entering Chavin's temple complex was like stepping into another world, one crafted to transform the minds of those who passed through it. Experiments with conch shell trumpets called pututus have revealed part of this design. When these instruments are played inside the stone corridors, the sound becomes deep and resonant. The vibrations travel through the walls, making it hard to tell where the source is. The noise is disorienting, especially in darkness. Ancient visitors moving through the tunnels would have heard these haunting blasts without knowing their origin. Priests may have used this effect to create awe and fear, making it seem as if supernatural beings were speaking from the stone itself. The physical sensation of the sound, echoing in the chest and bones, would have heightened the experience. Light played a similar role. The tunnels have narrow shafts where daylight or torchlight could enter suddenly, illuminating carvings or figures at key moments. Imagine walking in near darkness, guided by priests, when a hidden torch is revealed and a wall comes to life with shadows of jaguars or serpents. The sudden shift from dark to light would have felt like a revelation. Combined with the sound of pututus and the smell of incense or burning offerings, the effect would have been overwhelming. It was not just a temple visit. It was a carefully staged ritual designed to alter perception. Water added another layer. The complex includes channels that carried water through and beneath the temple. During certain seasons, flowing water would have been audible, blending with the sounds of trumpets and chanting. In some areas, water may have been released deliberately to flood or trickle through passageways. The interplay of sound, light, and water created a sensory environment unlike anything in daily life. Visitors likely felt they had entered a space between the human and the divine. The priests who controlled these experiences held great power. By guiding people through the tunnels and rituals, they could shape beliefs and emotions. A farmer from a distant valley might arrive with doubts or questions. After passing through the labyrinth, hearing otherworldly sounds and witnessing dramatic visions, that same person might leave convinced of the temple's authority. This ability to create powerful shared experiences would have helped unify diverse groups across the Andes. People speaking different languages and living in different regions could all be bound together by a common set of symbols and rituals. The temple's iconography supports this idea. Carvings throughout the site show hybrid beings that combine human and animal features. Fangs, claws, wings, and serpentine forms merge with human faces and bodies. These images may have represented the transformation experienced during rituals. A participant could symbolically become one of these beings, leaving behind their ordinary identity and taking on a divine role. The imagery also reflects the natural world of the Andes, where jaguars, eagles, and snakes held spiritual significance. Understanding these symbols fully is difficult, as there are no written records to explain them. They may have had multiple meanings, shifting depending on the context of the ritual or the audience. One famous carving, known as the lanzone, stands deep within the temple's core. This towering stone monolith depicts a fearsome figure with feline fangs and swirling hair like snakes. Its location at the intersection of multiple passageways suggests it was the climax of a ritual journey. Reaching the lanzone may have felt like arriving at the center of the universe. Visitors would approach in darkness, guided by sound and light, until they suddenly faced the towering image. The emotional impact of this moment would have been immense, reinforcing the temple's role as a place of revelation and transformation. The scale of Chavin influence remains a subject of debate. Artifacts bearing Chavin-style designs have been found across a wide region. From coastal areas to highland valleys, this suggests that the temple was not just a local shrine, but a center that drew pilgrims from far away. People may have traveled for days or weeks to participate in ceremonies, bringing goods and stories back to their home communities. In this way, Chavin's religious network could have spread ideas and styles across the Andes without direct political control. Pilgrimage, trade, and shared belief may have created a form of unity that did not rely on armies or empires. Some researchers wonder if the priests deliberately used these sensory tools to maintain their power. By controlling access to the tunnels, the timing of rituals, and the interpretation of symbols, they could shape how people understood the world. The secrecy of the temple layout reinforced this control. Ordinary visitors likely never saw the entire structure. They experienced it in fragments, moving through darkness and guided by others. This kept the process mysterious and maintained a sense of dependence on the priestly class. Consider the experience of a first-time visitor. Approaching the temple, you would see the massive stone walls rising from the valley floor. The air would smell of incense and smoke. You would be led into a narrow passage, your eyes straining to see in the dim light. Suddenly, a deep blast echoes through the walls. You cannot tell where it comes from, and your skin prickles. As you move deeper, the sound grows louder, mixing with the rush of unseen water. At a turn in the tunnel, a torch flares to life, revealing a carving of a jaguar human figure. Your guides chant, their voices amplified by the stone. Finally, you reach the central chamber and see the towering lanzone, its face lit dramatically from below. In that moment, you feel small, humbled, and connected to something far greater than yourself. When you emerge back into daylight, the world feels different. The temple has changed you. Such experiences would have had lasting effects. A community leader returning home after such a journey might share stories of visions and revelations, strengthening the temple's authority even from a distance. Over time, these shared experiences could knit together far-flung populations, creating a cultural network that spanned mountains and valleys. The architecture of Chavin de Wantar was more than stone and engineering. It was a tool for shaping human perception. The builders understood how to manipulate sound, light, and water to create profound emotional responses. Whether this was done purely for spiritual purposes or also as a means of control remains unclear. What is certain is that the temple's design was deliberate and sophisticated, showing a deep understanding of how environment and ritual could work together. Even in ruins, the site retains its power. Walking through the dark tunnels today, one can still hear the echoes of ancient trumpets and imagine the awe they inspired thousands of years ago. Off the coast of Yonaguni, the westernmost island of Japan, lies a formation that has sparked one of the most heated debates in archaeology and geology. Beneath the waves, in clear blue water, divers have found what appear to be massive steps, terraces, and flat platforms. The structure rises from the seafloor like a sunken pyramid, with sharp angles and straight lines that seem to suggest intentional design. Some see clear evidence of ancient human construction, while others insist it is a natural formation shaped by geological forces alone. The Yonaguni Monument sits at the boundary between these interpretations, leaving open questions about what it truly represents and what it might mean for our understanding of early coastal civilizations. The site was first brought to attention in the 1980s when a local diver exploring the area noticed the unusual shapes. Since then, underwater mapping projects have documented a complex arrangement of features. There are broad, flat terraces that resemble giant staircases, narrow passageways that look like corridors, and sharp-edged platforms that seem almost architectural. In certain areas, pillars and blocks appear to have broken off, lying scattered like the remains of ancient walls. To the human eye, especially through the mask of a diver, it is easy to read patterns into these shapes. They evoke images of temples, plazas, or even fortresses hidden beneath the sea. Geologists, however, point out that the region's bedrock is composed of sandstone and mudstone, which fracture naturally into straight-edged blocks. Waves, currents, and earthquakes can erode these blocks in ways that mimic human construction. Similar formations exist on land, where no one claims they were built by people. From this perspective, Yonaguni could be a dramatic but entirely natural product of tectonic activity and erosion. The sharp lines and right angles would not require human intervention. They are the result of natural stresses acting over millions of years. Archaeologists who argue for human involvement note certain features that seem less easily explained by geology alone. Some steps appear evenly spaced, as if following a planned design. Flat surfaces meet at precise corners that look carved rather than fractured. In a few places, divers have reported markings that could resemble tool marks or carvings, though these are difficult to confirm due to underwater visibility and the effects of marine growth. The sheer scale of the site adds to the mystery. If natural forces alone created such an arrangement, it would be one of the most elaborate examples of natural mimicry on record. Dating this formation is another challenge. During the last ice age, sea levels were much lower. Vast areas of land that are now underwater would have been dry and potentially habitable. If Yonaguni was above sea level during that time, it is conceivable that ancient humans could have modified it. The problem lies in establishing when this might have occurred and what kind of society would have been capable of such work. The earliest known large-scale architecture in Japan dates thousands of years later than the last ice age. If the monument were human-made, it would push back the timeline of complex construction in the region by a significant margin. If people did shape the Yonaguni structure, questions about their tools and motives follow. Without metal, they would have relied on stone implements to carve and move large blocks. Such work would have required a coordinated labor force and a shared purpose, whether religious, political, or practical. Perhaps the site served as a ceremonial center, a gathering place for rituals linked to the sea. Its location on the edge of an island chain suggests it could have been a marker for navigation or trade. Alternatively, it might have been part of a defensive network, though there is no direct evidence of warfare or fortification. Each of these possibilities depends on assumptions about a culture for which no clear remains have been found. The difficulty lies in distinguishing natural geological patterns from deliberate human design. Humans are wired to see patterns, especially ones that resemble our own creations. A pile of rocks can look like a wall, and a series of fractures can resemble steps. To make a strong case for human modification, archaeologists need evidence of consistent patterns that cannot be explained by random processes. This could include tool marks, signs of quarrying, or artifacts clearly associated with the site. So far, such evidence has been sparse. While some divers report carvings or shaped stones, these observations are often disputed or lack verification. The underwater environment complicates matters. Marine growth can obscure surfaces, while currents and sediment can move artifacts far from their original locations. Mapping projects using sonar and 3D imaging have helped clarify the site's structure. These technologies reveal that the terraces and platforms form a coherent pattern rather than a random jumble. Some researchers argue that this pattern suggests planning, while others counter that natural processes can also produce seemingly organized shapes. The debate often comes down to interpretation. Two experts can look at the same data and reach entirely different conclusions, shaped by their training and assumptions. The broader implications of Yonaguni are significant. If the site is natural, it remains an extraordinary geological formation and a valuable case study in how natural forces shape landscapes. If it is human-made, it would represent a lost chapter in human history, evidence of a coastal civilization that predates known settlements in the region. This possibility raises further questions. How many other sites might lie hidden beneath the sea, drowned when Ice Age glaciers melted and sea levels rose? Coastal areas would have been prime locations for early communities, offering access to fishing, trade, and transportation. As the ocean swallowed these areas, entire landscapes of human activity may have disappeared, leaving only traces like Yonaguni. Imagine standing on that landscape thousands of years ago, when the sea was far lower. The terraces might have been dry ground, with paths leading between stone platforms. People gather at the edge of a cliff to watch the sunrise, their voices carrying over the open ocean. Traders arrive by boat, bringing goods from distant islands. Over generations, the sea slowly rises, swallowing fields, homes, and eventually the structures themselves. By the time the final generation departs, only the highest stones remain above the waves. Then even they vanish, hidden beneath the water until modern divers rediscover them. Today, divers swim through the submerged corridors, their bubbles rising past edges that look like ancient stairways. Sunlight filters down through clear water, casting shifting patterns on the stone. The line between nature and culture blurs in this underwater world. Whether carved by human hands or shaped by the earth alone, the Yonaguni Monument challenges us to consider how fragile our records of the past are. It reminds us that coastlines change, seas rise, and the boundary between land and water is never fixed. The answers to its mysteries lie not only in the stones themselves, but in the stories we tell about what we see when we look beneath the surface.